It's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
Wacky Wednesday, Zimbabwe. Good evening and welcome to ZiFM Sport. The music certainly is wacky, but the stories anything but that. The team sometimes wacky, but always on a point. And that team is Chris Gray, Barry Manandi, Sean Tafirenyika, our producer, and my name is Mike Madoda. What you can look forward to on the home front, ZIFA have urged law enforcement agents to descend heavily on players and officials defying the national lockdown that was imposed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
In international sports news, New Zealand Super Rugby teams will be able to replace red-carded players, and drawn matches may be decided by a golden point tiebreaker when the country's domestic competition starts on the 13th of June. In Around the World in 60, we launch in Austria, where Formula One teams have been urged to make use of their reserves should any of their lead drivers test positive for the COVID-19 once delayed 2020 season starts. In Russia, the Court of Arbitration for Sport has announced Russia's appeal against a 4-year international competition ban will be held at the start of November. And we'll land in the United States, where the NBA is aiming to complete the 2020 season by mid-October as the league edges towards a return from the coronavirus shutdown.
We'll take our player of the day and then we'll dive into the beautiful game where we kick off in the Premier League, where clubs have been given the green light to take part in friendlies with strict protocols in place as they prepare for the restart of England's top flight season on the 17th of June. In La Liga, Karim Benzema, the Benz, is convinced Real Madrid will hit the ground running when they resume their La Liga campaign. In the Bundesliga, RB Salzburg head coach Jesse Marsch has been linked with the Borussia Dortmund job should they part ways with Lucien Favre. And in Serie A, Lazio are willing to listen to offers for midfielder Sergei Milinkovic-Savic when the transfer market opens up. All of that and so much more to look forward to here on Wacky Wednesday. Let's dive into our power play. Today, the track is called More and More. It's by Twice.
The Warriors, the Chevrons, the Cheetahs, the Mighty Warriors, and the Sables. From the pool to the track to the field, we are Team Zimbabwe. The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
All right, ZIFA have urged law enforcement agents to descend heavily on players and officials defying the national lockdown that was imposed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The stance by the National Football Mother Body comes after reports that a number of players contracted to Division 1 and Premier Soccer League clubs have, in the past few weeks, been seen engaging in money games, especially in Harare. ZIFA said they remain committed to making sure all their affiliates and players religiously adhere to the lockdown orders. Now, the association said anyone who was found in defiance was, in fact, a criminal who should be decisively dealt with by the police. Now, this is what the ZIFA spokesperson, Kolisani Gwesela, had to say. Football celebrates ethos of respect for rules, and we find it extremely criminal to break lockdown rules. We encourage the police to identify the perpetrators who are abusing football by breaking lockdown rules and bring them to book. ZIFA will also take stern action against those participating in any football activity during lockdown. COVID-19 is real, he went on to say. Michael, strong words from the spokesperson at ZIFA. He's perfectly right, isn't he?
Yeah, he's perfectly right, but he also sounds like a man who loves the sound of his own voice, Barry, and so this is all just a bunch of hot air for me, because he is...
all guff!
It's all guff, Barry, all guff. So he's deflecting for me, pushing the responsibility to the Zimbabwe Republic Police Yes, they are in charge of enforcing the laws of the land. But who are they to know who's a Premiership footballer, who's a Division 1 footballer, when they're just coppers? It's up to ZIFA as well to be working with the Zimbabwe Republic Police and identifying the individuals and the culprits, because a policeman gets to Zimbabwe grounds in Highfield and there's a game of footy on. How does he identify the Premiership footballer from the Windy from Chipisa, who's decided to have a kickabout because he wants to earn more money to buy his milli meal and his meat for that evening? So I think ZIFA, instead of just coming out with these bold statements in the media, should be actually working hand in hand with the Zimbabwe Republic Police to make sure that they help in the policing, because part of policing is the identification of offending individuals, and the ZRP are ill-equipped to do that.
That policeman arriving at Zimbabwe grounds, Chris, and seeing a game of footy on, has got to be able to then just arrest everybody. That's pretty much what Gwesela is saying, and saying that no football should be taking place, therefore police, Sungaiwan.
Absolutely, but look, I understand his sentiment, and I understand the fact that, you know, they'd like to come out as ZIFA and make these very bold statements about what's supposed to be taking place, but you're addressing the symptom and not the cause of the situation. The cause of the situation is that our football teams are in a scenario where some of them can't afford to pay their players. That's one scenario. People need to survive somehow, and if it means I'm taking it to the street and I'm risking my career because I have a family to feed, that's exactly what's going to happen. FIFA came out with a statement and they said that they were dispersing various amounts to their affiliations, and I don't know if that money has arrived in Zimbabwe, but if it has, where is it? Has it been distributed to the various teams? Are these teams now supporting their players? I think it's fair and fine to come out and say this shouldn't be happening, but let's address exactly why it's happening. It's a pretty sad situation we have in our football, where our footballers will take to literally the streets in order to make some sort of income. And these are not players who are in Division 2 and so on. These are Premier League players who cannot afford to sustain themselves, and these are Premier League teams that cannot afford to sustain their players and the rest of their teams. You have members of coaching staff who are now taking to actually running small businesses and doing things like market gardening in order to make ends meet. And that is the very realistic situation that our football finds itself in. So what I would expect from a body like ZIFA is not to come out and say, arrest people. It's to say, okay, this is the plan that we have in place to support our teams and to support the players. Because this is not, no one takes to the streets and risks their careers for absolutely nothing. Manani and Zara, and that's the simple matter at hand.
So I think Chris makes a fine point about the funding that came in from FIFA, because what ZIFA then announced is that they were going to basically waive off the affiliation fees of football clubs. But waiving off the affiliation fees of football clubs is something that benefits the owners of football clubs. It's not something that benefits the players. What we have seen from other nations, the likes of Botswana, the likes of Kenya, they have come out and they've come up with stipends for players to say, you know what, this is what we're going to give you. It may not cover everything that you need, but it's something. This is something that you can use to buy food, okay? I think in Botswana, it works out to about 1,600 pula, which is decent in that economy. Kenya has come up with $100 per player per month. That's the sort of thing that I was expecting to come out of ZIFA when they were talking about the COVID-19 mitigation fund that came from FIFA. Something that actually trickles down to the players because they need it the most.
That's a poignant element of all of this, Mike. And having dug a little bit deeper on that issue that was announced by ZIFA, we're going to be waiving affiliation fees for our affiliates. In actual fact, it wasn't the clubs that benefited from the waiving of the affiliation fees. It was actually the leagues. So it's the Casalaga Premier Soccer League, it's Northern Region, Central Region. It's at regional level, at league level. Those who are affiliated to ZIFA were then given the opportunity to waive their affiliation fees. So this doesn't even get down to club level. The announcement made by ZIFA. So clubs have been required to pay their affiliation fees as per normal to the leagues that they're participating in. So nothing has been done at team level, let alone at player level, by ZIFA by the funds that came from FIFA. So that's a real concern, because we haven't seen a plan. And that's the next point I wanna jump onto, guys, here. The first communication, in inverted commas, first communication that we're getting from ZIFA is to say arrest players breaking lockdown. Up to now, we've been under lockdown for nearly 3 months. We're going into our third month, and we haven't heard a concerted plan from the mother body to say when football restarts, this is how it will restart. They haven't got that plan in place. They haven't announced that. They haven't done anything that mitigates or at least tries to get football back on the rails. In England, they've got Project Restart. We know that La Liga had a similar plan, but Germany wouldn't have kicked off without the plan that they had. ZIFA is quiet. Instead, they're talking to the ZRP.
Deflect, Barry. Just like they've deflected to ZRP, ZIFA will be deflecting to the Sports and Recreation Commission, to the Ministry of Sport as well, to say, okay, we take guidance from the ministry, we take guidance from the SRC. So no one is willing to accept responsibility and to think ahead of time. We are very reactionary in the way that we govern our sports associations. We wait for something to happen and then we scramble and make a plan to react to what has happened. So someone at the sports ministry is going to suddenly announce, hey, footy, you can play. And then they're all going to be scrambling. Hey, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do now? What do we do? What are the
protocols? Wait to be told what to do.
Yeah. They wait to be told what to do instead of coming up to a plan which can then be adjusted as the situation regards the coronavirus pandemic unfolds. As it gets better, you can remove some of the issues that you've got and then add other little things and tweak it as you go.
Absolutely. And what we might see is a situation where they'll copy paste from another league in, say, Europe, and copy paste that and say, these are our regulations, this is how we're going to do things. There's been no thought that we can see that's been put in. And if ever a time that bodies like ZIFA needed to come to the fore and say, we need to revise the commercial models of our football, now is the time. Because possibly when the leagues do restart, teams are not going to be benefiting from things like gate taking, which we know this is what our system was used to, is we wait for match day and we wait for match day revenues only. And that's not going to happen. What's going to happen post that is a continuing scenario where now we're going to possibly have players going on strike because they haven't been paid an X amount of time. And we might see them actually return to these street football games in order to make some sort of income. So if ever a plan was needed from a financial perspective, it's now, and Tolisani Gwesela needs to spend his time actually working on that plan and communicating with the leagues, with football in this country to say this is what we're going to do. Instead, we're hearing about arrests. And it's a little bit disappointing for me, considering what other bodies in the region, let's not go too far, just in the region, what they've managed to come up with.
The other thing that I just want to throw with, guys, Barry, before you wrap it up, is to say that have we, as Zimbabwe football, across the board, ZIFA, the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League, ETC, have we done enough to offer the psychological support services that these players need? Remember, these are the guys that eat and live football. Football is what they do from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening. Football is what they do on a Saturday or on a Sunday. Football is their life. All of a sudden, this thing has been taken away from them and they've been left with nothing. These guys are not marketers, they're not engineers, they're not accountants, they're footballers. They can't even train as a group. Their families have been the team. That's where they get their life and their meaning from. And that's been taken away from. Have we even made any consideration as ZIFA, as the league, to say, what can we do to reach out to these players, to monitor them, to make sure that, they're okay upstairs. They're okay. Yeah. They're doing all right.
That's a pertinent point, Mike. And the sad answer to that is we don't know. Why? Because no plan has been publicized coming out of the football mother, the governing body for football in Zimbabwe, and that is ZIFA. To their credit, the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League gave us an announcement, I think it was last week, where they said they're now engaging with their medical committee, which is now coming up with a plan as to how clubs can restart. But the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League is 18 clubs. That's all. There are 64 in Division 1. There are even more in Division 2 that need the support of ZIFA for a plan going forward. That plan doesn't look like it's coming out any time soon, because ZIFA is waiting for things to happen. So the resounding resolution right here from the ZiFM Sport team is that we are sitting here not knowing where we are going, and the playing of money games or playing in money games for players is merely a symptom. It is not the disease.
Hi, my name is Sean Williams, Zimbabwe cricket captain. You're listening to ZiFM Sport. Z.
Right, let's give you some local sports news, starting with cricket, where Zimbabwe cricket have made giant strides under the International Cricket Council-controlled funding scheme after virtually settling the delicate issue of loans, which was choking the domestic game. So grave was the problem of the ZC liabilities. Zimbabwe's full membership at the ICC was even under huge threat if a solution had not been found. Zimbabwe cricket have now finally paid off the ICC loan, which was $3 million, and the $10 million local bank loans, which were in 2017 housed under the Zimbabwe Asset Management Corporation, ZAMCO. The non-performing loans with CBZ Bank, Metbank, EcoBank, as well as NMB were housed under ZAMCO in 2017 after Zimbabwe cricket got a 30% discount.
Well done.
In athletics, Zimbabwe's promising sprinter Ngoni Makusha says going back to normal training is a huge step towards boosting the efforts he has been making to stay in shape. Makusha is one of the several athletes the National Athletics Association of Zimbabwe are pinning their hopes on to meet the qualifying times for the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games, which will no longer be 2020 but more 2021. The showcase has been moved to next year. Makusha said the lifting of the restrictions which prohibited sporting activities will help his cause, as he'll get the time he needs to get ready for the resumption of qualifying events. And we wrap it up with news coming out of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, ZAC, who will investigate possible embezzlement, the looting of state resources during renovations of White City Stadium in 2014. The renovations were done ahead of the 2014 African Union Sports Council Region 5 Under-20 Youth Games that were held in Bulawayo. The stadium underwent massive refurbishment that saw a state-of-the-art electronic timing system, a VIP area, a giant monitor being installed, while the 400-meter athletics track was supposed to have a tartan surface laid, but only 100 meters of the track was covered. The official position was that the contractor missed the deadline, but still nothing was done after the games.
Hi, this is Mike Madoda, and you can catch me and the team for all the latest breaking news out of the world of sport, local as well as international, on your favorite station, my station, your station, ZiFM. We are Z-Team on ZiFM Sport.
Z. From the front of the grid to the back of the net, it's ZiFM Sport. International Sports News Roundup, where the world comes out to play.
International sports news: New Zealand Super Rugby teams will be able to replace red-carded players, and drawn matches may be decided by a golden point tiebreaker where the country's domestic competition starts on the 13th of June. The changes are aimed at making the game more exciting for fans and will be trialled during the 10-week event, which will kick off with a game between the Otago Highlanders and the Waikato Chiefs in Dunedin. Players who receive a red card can be replaced 20 minutes after they are sent off and will not be allowed to return to the field. Innovation. That's the watchword, isn't it, Barry, as sport tries to find its feet after the COVID-19 pandemic?
It is. The watchword is innovation. Flexibility is another watchword as well, because we've all got to be flexible with how things have gone. And what I do anticipate is that some of these innovations are going to remain even after the pandemic is a long a thing of the past, and that's a good thing. I think that sport needed that boost, and the fact that we've been forced into it is not necessarily a good thing that we have been forced, but the fact that it's happening is certainly a brilliant thing.
This idea around a 20-minute sin binning, Chris, for a red card. It's an idea that I'm beginning to warm to, and an idea that I think should be explored even when normal rugby does return, because rugby is a sport that is premised on physicality, that things such as weight, power, endurance, they all come into play. And when you find yourself one man short in rugby, it tells. There's a telling effect in how you perform at every level of the game, in every aspect of the game. So for me, this is one that I think should be considered, because I think 20 minutes is punishment enough. If a team is red carded, let's say in the first 10 minutes in a rugby match, usually that team is on a hiding to nothing because you're playing 70 minutes, a man down.
Absolutely, and you can see it definitely in a match where that happens. It's an automatic swing in the favor of the opposing team. So I think this 20 minutes will kind of, it's enough of a punishment, as it were, for that particular team. But at the same time, they're given a chance to bounce back. And in this scenario, what they're trying to do is make it continuously more competitive and entertaining for the fans as well. And I think for players as well, just knowing the fact that, okay, it's a 20-minute lapse, but we can bounce back into this, I think definitely will have an impact even mentally on them as well. In terms of bouncing back in a particular game.
It'll particularly also help, I think, Mike, in the close games. You know, they're those games where it could go either way, and sometimes a red card actually tips the scale. What we want to see is that, yes, fine, let it tip the scale for the 20 minutes that they're down to 14 men or whatever it is, like a regular sin binning, which is your 10 minutes for a yellow card. But this one, for 20 minutes, it's how much of a cushion can you gain? And in the closer games, you'll probably find that in those 20 minutes, the cushion isn't that great and things level out again. So I think we're going to see a lot more competition begin to creep into the game if this is retained. And I certainly agree with you. This should be retained even beyond the COVID amendment.
And the other innovation that you're talking about is that if a match is tied after regular time, the first team to score by a drop goal, penalty kick or try during a 10-minute extra time period will be awarded the win. Your thoughts on this one, Chris?
I think this is an interesting one because it brings a match right down to the very last second and to one last point. And look, if you're the opposing team, you're not going to enjoy this. But at the same time, it keeps it competitive right until the very last second. So I think it's an interesting innovation. Should it stay beyond this COVID-19 era? I'm not too sure. But yeah. I think in terms of just keeping it exciting right up until that last point.
No. It's a no from me.
Listen, I don't think this one should be a permanent feature of rugby match.
Permanently.
But in terms of just being trialed out, for me, it's great, especially if you're in a cup format, in a tournament setup, where you're basically saying, okay, the first person to score a point, because it encourages attacking play, okay? It means that you got to keep the ball in hand in order to win the game. And therefore, teams that have got a kicking game, teams like England, like South Africa, who like to kick the ball away, those teams will be challenged. And I think you'll find out that teams that can actually shift the ball a bit, Australia, New Zealand, the RGs have come along in leaps and bounds, France, those teams now will fancy their chances. So it just makes, Barry, those tied matches a bit unpredictable if they're in a scenario where a winner must be found.
It's still a no from me, regardless of the points that you both have made. It's still a no from me. Here's why. And that's because you remember, I forget what year that was, when Sepp Blatter in football whipped out of his back pocket the golden goal, silver goal, and straight off the training ground. And it broke hearts. Play extra time. Whoever wins extra time wins the game. Not this next try, next goal, next point wins. We're going to kill each other. No, it's a no for me. It was no back then with Sepp Blatter. It's still a no for me.
But isn't that exactly the point? That it'll make it a lot more, it'll be a lot more attacks, it'll be a lot more interesting towards the end there. Isn't that the point?
Yeah, to bring excitement to the final 10 minutes instead of just making it,
It's a tied game already, guys. The game is already tied. So it's already.
Why are you afraid of losing? How can you back the emotions of a team that's afraid to lose? Let's back the team that's going to win.
I'm not afraid of losing. What I'm saying is that level the playing field. It's a tied game. If you score first, and there's hold on. And if you score first, wait, guys. If you score first in the first 3 minutes, I've got 7 minutes that I can realistically get back into the game and possibly win it. Does that not even add even more excitement?
No.
No.
Yes, it does. Listen, guys, what you're saying is that you're doing the same thing Seb Blatter did. You're taking this off the training ground where it works, and there's no harm, no foul. Okay, it's just
what's the harm? What's the harm
versus white bib?
What's the harm?
The harm is that it takes away the sporting element of it. Sporting element says that let's give you all a level chance, an ability within time. That's why we have halves at 40 minutes for a half. 40 minutes for another half. You know you've got time. Whether you go behind, you've got time to come back into the game.
But that's exactly the point.
So hard to get it back into the game. Give yourself another chance to get back into the game.
No, score one final point, the golden point. That's it. If the teams are level, these teams are drawn already. So everything is level.
You've been given your 40 minutes a piece already. It's not like you've been denied.
Everyone has got their chance.
You've been given your halves already, and we are saying, guys, you guys are neck and neck, can't be separated. How do we separate you? So this is what we're coming up with to separate you. Okay, so Chris and I, we are for it. Barry, you lose 2-1. Golden goal. Go on. But anyway, let's take this one here. Go to our listeners, guys. Get in touch with us at ZiFM Sport. Tell us what you think. Should rugby implement its version of the golden goal? The team to score the first point in extra time wins the game, whether it's a drop goal, a penalty, or a try. You score first, you win the game in the event that the scores were tied after 18 minutes. We are on Twitter and Facebook at ZiFM Sport. You can also look for Chris Gray, Barry Manandi, Sean Tafilinika, or myself, Mike Madoda, on Twitter.
Hi, I'm JC Krill, Springbok and Blue Bulls backline player. You are listening to ZiFM Sports.
Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
We take off in Austria, where Formula One teams have been urged to make use of their reserves should any of their lead drivers test positive for COVID-19 once the delayed 2020 season starts, with Chase Carey reaffirming that races will not be cancelled in that circumstance. Carey, Formula One's chairman and chief executive, was speaking after the sport published an 8-race initial calendar, with the season starting in Austria on the 5th of July. The original March 15 opener in Australia was cancelled after a McLaren team member returned a positive test for the new coronavirus before the weekend had started. We head over to Russia, where the Court of Arbitration for Sport has announced Russia's appeal against a 4-year international competition ban will be held at the start of November. In a list of hearings published on its website, CAS said that the Russian anti-doping agency would contest the punishment handed down by the World Anti-Doping Agency from the 2nd to the 5th of November. The World Anti-Doping Agency declared the Russian Anti-Doping Agency non-compliant with its code last December after alleging that laboratory data had been manipulated as Russian teams were blocked from competing in global sporting events. We touched down in the US, where the NBA is aiming to complete the 2020 season by mid-October as the league edges towards the return from the coronavirus shutdown. ESPN reported that according to a time frame due to be voted on by the NBA's Board of Governors tomorrow, Game 7 of the NBA Finals would take place no later than the 12th of October. The NBA and NBA Players Association are still finalizing the details of the resumption of the season, which was halted on the 11th of March as the coronavirus pandemic erupted. ESPN reported that the league is planning a 22-team format for its return to play on the 31st of July.
Hi, I'm Clemens Matau, chicken in midfielder. You're listening to ZiFM Sport.
The big leagues, the big teams, the big players. The beautiful game on ZiFM Sport. All the rivalry.
Here is Harry Kane for Tottenham. Oh, what a goal! A classic derby goal from Harry Kane. Catch him if you can.
All the stars.
Oh, back here's Liverpool 2 in front. Talk about impudent. Talk about improvisation. Talk about Sadio Mane.
And all the game-changing moments.
And Raheem Sterling rattles it home. And once more, City are in front in a trice.
All the updates from the Premier League on ZiFM Sport.
All right, now Premier League clubs have been given the green light to take part in friendlies with strict protocols in place as they prepare for the restart of England's top flight season on the 17th of June. Venues must not be more than 90 minutes away, and players will need to travel in their own cars and arrive in full kit. Matches will be refereed by members of the club's coaching staff, and players involved need to have returned a negative test for COVID-19. Project Restart, again, a modification and one that we certainly can understand, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're just trying to do their best to make sure that this season is resolved in one way or the other on the field of play. The conditions are not ideal. Some of the regulations are not ideal, but these are different times. This is not it's not business as usual in the world of sport. And so they've got to be compromises that are sought and compromises that are made just to make sure that people at least get some sort of finish to the season.
Chris, we saw Liverpool conducting a bit of a practice match amongst their squad. That's the sort of thing that's going to happen. The match was obviously refereed by one of the coaching staff. This protocol essentially just fits directly into that manner of doing things. And I think we're going to see the Premier League clubs not necessarily take on other Premier League clubs. It's likely that they'll take on championship clubs and that sort of thing. So this, I don't think this is going to disrupt preparations. If anything, it's going to enrich the product that we will see at the end of the day when football returns on the 17th of June.
Definitely. I think they've learned from, the Bundesliga, where we saw in those, even just the first few matches where teams were kind of in the first 20 minutes still grappling with, getting back into the swing of things. And in this scenario, we're going to see, much richer football, even initially, because they've gotten back into actual play. It's one thing for practice sessions to take place, but to actually play another team relatively competitively, I think is going to enrich the game quite a bit. The initial product that we'll get post-COVID anyway.
Well, Brendan Rodgers, the Leicester City manager, has already said that they will stage practice games at the King Power Stadium, their home stadium, to help their players get up to speed. So certainly they're making that consideration, because it's very different when you're training and time in the middle, as they say, to use the cricket parlance, Mike.
Absolutely. I think you need to get yourself match fit and up to speed. And that's one way that they're going to try and seek to do it. The Bundesliga didn't do much of it. In fact, they didn't do any of it. The teams were just put in their camp. In their camps, they practiced and then they just went out to play. So the English Premier League is going a step further to try and give the teams in their league a semblance of a pre-season and to try and get these teams back to where they were in February before the league was brought to a premature end or to a premature pause. They're trying to make sure that they have the right sort of intensity, the right sort of fitness levels, and it also helps in terms of the health of the players. We'll probably find out that we have lost a lot less injuries that will be suffered by the players than was previously anticipated, because a lot of people are highlighting the injury risk if players were suddenly just brought back into action without any sort of meaningful preseason. So I like the idea. Like Chris said, that it'll mean that the contests in the English Premier League, that Arsenal Man City game is likely to be blood and thunder rather than played at walking pace.
Well, next week La Liga gets underway. The week after that, hopefully, Premier League will be back. The 17th of June is the date that you've already marked in your calendar, I'm positive of. And at this stage, it looks like it's going ahead.
News out of Spain is that Karim Benzema is convinced that Real Madrid will hit the ground running when they resume their La Liga campaign, highlighting Zinedine Zidane's emphasis on enjoyment following the coronavirus-enforced hiatus. After a 3-month suspension due to the season due to the COVID-19 outbreak, Real Madrid will return to the pitch on June 14 when they host Eibar. Now, La Liga has been allowed to recommence behind closed doors thanks to the threat of the virus decreasing, and Real Madrid looks set to push Barcelona all the way in the title race. And that's what it's all about in Spain. It's a 2-horse race at the top of the table. Barcelona, who have dominated the Liga over the last 10 years, Barry. They've won it, I think, 8 out of 11 times, looking to make it 9 out of 12 and to stamp their dominance in that country. And Real Madrid, who have seen their their brand equity fall away somewhat as a result of that dominance from Catalonia?
Yeah, and that dominance is set to continue in truth if Real Madrid don't pull the finger out. And it's a 9th title in 12 seasons that, if we're to be fair, Barcelona doesn't deserve. Because in truth, this is a Barcelona side that hasn't been at its best. So Zinedine Zidane, yes, his emphasis is on enjoyment, and hopefully his players are enjoying it. But that enjoyment certainly isn't coming across to the fans, because it's not causing Real Madrid to be the dominant side that they potentially should have been and could have been in this season. So I think it's one that they've let Barcelona actually be in the hunt for, but Real Madrid should have far and away been have sealed this title already.
Chris, we want to go back to just a couple of weeks before the season was temporarily suspended in Spain. Real Madrid at that time, they were, I think, in a position where heading into El Clasico, they could have built up as much as a 5-point lead. But they then dropped points the week before El Clasico, managed to beat Barcelona in El Clasico. And just when people thought that, Real Madrid are going to go chugging off into the distance and Barcelona won't catch up, what do? They drop points the following game and Barcelona goes back on top of the league. So that looked like a lost opportunity, and it looks like this Real Madrid side, also trailing Man City in Europe in the Champions League, they are a desperate bunch, and I guess that's why maybe Zidane is saying, hey, let's enjoy our football, because he's trying to relieve the pressure just to make sure that they go into this phase of the season without any pressure.
I think so. And I also think it's an intentional message to just put it out there. Real Madrid is here, to enjoy the football and enjoy the game. And I think for the fans as well, then that message comes across and they're not necessarily putting as much pressure on the team. But I think to a certain extent, the focus might be enjoyment. He's telling the players to enjoy themselves and putting out this public message. But I think this is a situation where he knows Real Madrid desperately need to crack on and to manage to get those wins. They're only 2 points behind. So this thing is still pretty much within their reach. Should they have sealed it a few match days ago? Well, before the coronavirus shutdown, they should have. But I think they still have a big opportunity. And Zinedine Zidane is very cognizant of the fact that they can still walk away with this thing and make sure that Barcelona don't run off into the sunset, as it were.
This Barcelona we're talking about, Barry, sees the return of Luis Suarez, sees the return of a couple of players who had been out injured. So Barcelona's lethargy in front of goal is certain to disappear now, with Lionel Messi able to play as the playmaker and Luis Suarez able to play as the number 9. And they'll be very difficult to stop, because Barcelona will be looking at it this way. They'll say to themselves, we are done with Real Madrid. We're done with Atletico Madrid. Surely there's clear water ahead of us.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why I said as the premise that I think this is a title that Barcelona will ultimately win. And that's because of the return of Luis Suarez. You could see that before the COVID break, Barcelona was they had a huge amount of profligacy in front of goal. So that was causing them to draw games, to lose games that they shouldn't have, because they created enough chances to get over the line. Now, with Luis Suarez, who's a certified gunslinger, El Pistolero, he can do the job. So consequently, Zidane has got a big job on his hands, but Barcelona will be licking their chops and saying we can go all the way and finish this all.
A quick one, Barry. Does Zidane lose his job? Because you're taking a look at how last season ended as well, knocked out of the Champions League. In fact, it was trophyless, isn't it, for Real Madrid last season? Knocked out of the Champions League in a game that a lot of people thought they should win versus Ajax. Lost out on the title to Barcelona. Didn't win the King's Cup. And they are facing a similar season again in Spain. This could be 2 seasons that they go without a trophy. Zidane, surely his job will come under scrutiny.
Yes, his job will come under scrutiny, barring the fact that he's got some information that is very delicate about Florentino Perez, who can't fire him. So, in truth, any other manager, certainly shoe in to get fired. But I think Zidane is going to be given another season, a bit more hope. He won't get fired this season, I don't expect. I suspect that next season will be last chance to leave.
RB Salzburg head coach Jesse Marsch has been linked with the Borussia Dortmund job. Should they part ways with Lucien Favre? According to Sport Bild, the 46-year-old worked under Ralf Rangnick at RB Leipzig last season and therefore has Bundesliga experience. Marsch recently lifted the 2019-20 Austrian Cup with RB Salzburg. So Barry, it looks like Borussia Dortmund may be parting ways with Lucien Favre. Is Jesse Marsch the right way to go? Is he the kind of candidate that they would need at this point?
I think yes and no. Number one, yes, from a footballing perspective in terms of the style of play, what they can get out of Jesse Marsch. I think we've seen at Salzburg that he is a coach who is in the mold of a Lucien Favre. He's in the mold of a Julian Nagelsmann, the mold of a Jurgen Klopp. Possession-based, high press, entertaining rock and roll football with a decent enough defense. The challenge is that giving the job to Jesse Marsch and then losing your top talent is going to give you the same results. So Dortmund has got a few more problems, and that's where my no comes from, where I feel that they are judging Lucien Favre a little bit harshly because of the fact that I think he's had easily his best player and the team captain Marco Reus in and out of the team for the past 2 seasons, to be fair. And so consequently, he hasn't had that basis where he can continue to have the selection. Similarly, he's likely to lose quite a few key players this coming window. So I would have said that if they do fire him, it's a knee-jerk reaction more so than one that's practical.
Mike, for you, just off of what Barry is saying, if you take a look at the amount that they spent, let's say the last 2 years in the transfer windows, Borussia Dortmund has given Lucien Favre a chance. He's been able to acquire the players that he wanted. Is it time for them to then look at the lack of consistency that we see from Borussia Dortmund, especially in those critical moments where, for example, last week they needed to grab that win against Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, and they don't manage to do that, and then they slip further and further behind. Are they getting frustrated with him, or he's been given enough of a chance, or like Barry is saying, he hasn't been given enough of a chance?
I think everything is predicated on what Barry mentioned earlier. I think going forward, you can only judge the man if you're going to allow him to keep his best players, the players he wants, and then you don't sell off your best talent. But there's no doubting when you take a look at his body of work over the last 2 seasons, Borussia Dortmund have repeatedly fallen short in critical moments. Games which they were supposed to win, matchups in which they were supposed to compete and show championship spirit, they have fallen short. That game you highlight versus Bayern Munich, that's a game. You are going into this game 4 points behind Bayern Munich. You need to win that game to draw within 1 point. You know, you've got to give it a go. You've got to at least win that game. You've got to win the game against your direct competitors. They didn't do that. And there have been other games. I think there were games earlier in the season versus Schalke. There was another game versus Union Berlin. There was a game versus Borussia Mönchengladbach. Games in which they dropped points needlessly. And so that has always been the challenge, I think, for Lucien Favre, that is he a top manager, or he's just a good manager? Is he a manager that can help you breach the top tier of European football? Or he's a manager that can mount a challenge in Germany but never quite get over the line?
And pertinent questions, Mike. And those questions, I feel, can only be answered if they give him another season. And by that, I'm not saying patience. But what I am saying is that even with Jurgen Klopp, when in the revival of BVB, it took a couple of seasons and him finding his way. Now, if they allow Lucien Favre, who I believe, when you watch Borussia Dortmund, they're a good side. And that's exemplified by the fact that in many of the games that they play in the Bundesliga, they blow teams off the park. You can see that he's a good manager. Give him the time, give him the support, and he could be your next Jurgen Klopp.
Mike, Jesse Marsch not necessarily the right candidate for them, possibly. If you were to present a candidate for the Borussia Dortmund job, who would it be?
Pochettino. He doesn't have a job, so get him. It's very difficult. it's very difficult to replace managers because, the top managers right now are in a job. Even Jose Mourinho is in a job at Tottenham Hotspur. Klopp is at Liverpool. Pep is at City. Ancelotti is at Everton. All the really good managers right now are occupied in some sort of job. So you would have to go for a young up-and-coming manager. So you would have to look at Pochettino, I think leads the line of young upcoming managers, and he'd be easier to sign on the basis that he's not in the job. So it's just a question of presenting the project and selling the club to him. I don't think that's too hard. Borussia Dortmund is a club that sells itself. The fans are fantastic, the best in Europe. So it's just about selling the football project and hoping him to come. He can come on board. The other one will be, managers like the fella that came to Chelsea and then it didn't quite work out for him. He's now at Marseille, the Portuguese guy. He was supposed to be the new Mourinho.
What's his name? AVB.
Yeah, AVB as well. He's kind of like rebuilt his reputation as well. In France with Marseille, they've qualified for the Champions League. That's sort of like the tier of managers. So those are the guys that would be available to them. So for me, I would say Pochettino. Go for Pochettino. If you're going to fire him now and get Pochettino.
Now, Lazio are willing to listen to offers for midfielder Sergei Milinkovic-Savic when the transfer market opens. However, sporting director Iglitare said Milinkovic-Savic will not be available at a reduced rate due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Serbian international has been heavily linked with Manchester United and Paris Saint-Germain, as well as Serie A rivals Inter and Juventus. Mike, you like this player. Your thoughts on this? The only prohibitive factor will probably be the price tag.
Yes, he's going to be expensive. Man United have been linked with him for a long time. The last 3 years, they talked about this guy. He's a player that Man United would do well to sign because he is a cut above the Scott McTominays, the Freds. He's a baller. You put him in there and you sell Pogba. I've got no problems with that. If they're getting this guy, he's a proper footballer. The price tag, to be honest, he's going to be costly because he's a prized asset for Lazio. They know his worth. You're not going to get this guy for less than 70 or 80. He's going to be right up there. So I think he's one of those signings that they can only make if they sell Pogba.
Yeah, well, previously Lazio has talked about a price.
He sort of like operates in the same areas because I don't think you can play Pogba, Bruno, and Milankovic in the same team. You can't. Because you would have to operate without a holding midfielder. If you operate without a holding midfielder, you're going to be torn to shreds. So they're going to have to get rid of Pogba because I think Bruno is here to stay.
Yeah, and if they sell Pogba and with that money get Milinkovic-Savic, that would be a good bit of business done by Manchester United. And I can see Chris licking her chops at that prospect. All right, we're done for today. We can't carry on, unfortunately. We'll catch you tomorrow for our shortened edition of ZiFM Sport. Thanks for joining us. May God richly bless you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Manande, out.
And it's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
The biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.